Hey everybody, ronarray here, and since only Tierlist on PoE Early Access release that I did was a complete satire, people have been asking me for a real one for a pretty long time. So right now, since we have a lot of new Ascendancies, and I already did breakdowns for almost all of them, I think it's a perfect time to make real one. Please keep in mind that we still don't have patch notes, and this list is mostly prediction based. I don't really think they will change Ascendancies too heavily, but changes to skills can also affect it. I will try to provide some valid justification for all of my picks, but tier lists in general are also heavily opinionated, so take it with a grain of salt as always. Also, there are going to be a proper timestamps for every Ascendancy, so if you're interested for a placement for a particular Ascendancy, just click on that. And if you're just interested in the final result without any justification, click on the dedicated timestamp as well. Let's go and see which one are good. So, talking about the tier list itself, I would start with obvious choices and new Ascendancies, because most people are interested in new Ascendancies first, and we will need to see how it will go for all of them. First off, I think it's going to be an Amazon. Amazon is currently looking so good, and right now you have a lot of potential builds. You can play Amazon with bows, you can play Amazon with spears, maybe you can do any other type of attacks, even bleed is looking so good for it. So I think Amazon should be in an S tier and is going to be one of the best new Ascendancies, especially after GGG explained how Creed is going to work, and for Creed based builds Amazon is just going to be absolutely insane. Right now there's only one kind of downside to Amazon, there's only one defensive node, so if you will not have proper defenses, you could be a little squishy, but with a very big damage and pretty nice nodes otherwise, both for crits and elemental fusion, I think Amazon is definitely need to stay in S. Talking about another new class which is probably going to an F, that's a Lich. Lich right now has a lot of potential. I think it's going to be one of the strongest caster just because of the 30% of more spell damage for the cast. It also has phylactery and has a very good mechanic to survive better, because currently Lich is looking much tankier than, for example, Amazon, and you will be able to face tank and survive without a lot of issues. You can also play minions with Lich, and if Spectres will be very strong on release, I think Lich is going to be one of the most popular Ascendancies for it. Another Ascendancy that people discussed a lot, and in my opinion is not really that good, is a Ritualist. I honestly expected Ritualist to be a little stronger, but since we already know that Ingenuity is going to get nerfed, maybe not heavily, but at least to some percentage, Ritualist is going to be not that good, especially at the league start, because that class is mostly created for the endgame when you can utilize all the 3 rings to the maximum potential. And I also think that for Ritualist, the biggest upside that you can use Ritualist to play with 3 unique rings, and 3 unique rings could be build enabling. So there is some chance that Ritualist will go to A, but I currently think it will stay around B. And talking about all the Ascendancies, which in my opinion is still going to perform, I think one of them is Deadeye, because Deadeye has been one of the best Ascendancies in early access. It has almost everything, it has speed, it has damage, and it could be played with spears as well. So you can play bows, you can play spears. And in my opinion, if they're going to nerf bows to some degree, Deadeye is still probably going to stay S. However, if the nerfs for bow is going to be too strong, there is a big chance that it will fall to A. But I don't really believe that they're going to gut bows completely, and I'm going to keep that in S. Another old Ascendancy which in my opinion is absolutely S is Monk. Monk being very popular in early access. It had tremendous amount of damage and a lot of tankiness, because it's in the right side of the tree, you can easily stack energy shield there, or evasion if you prefer it. It also has a very cool nodes with crits as well, because you can ignore elemental resistances with it. And in current situation, Monk also has a lot of spirit with spirit bonuses. So I think even if some part of that would be touched with nerfs, Monk is still going to stay a very stable S tier, because it's a very strong base for almost any kind of elemental build right now. And moving forward, we also have Smith of Kitava, which in my opinion for a starter should be an S tier, but in the endgame I think it will fall a little behind, because I'm still not sold on Manifest Weapon and Temper Weapon and nodes like that. It can provide a lot of tankiness, but unfortunately there is not a lot of damage bonuses, and I would say it's a counterpart of Amazon. When Amazon is just dealing a lot of damage, Smith is pretty much just very tanky. But I don't think that Smith will feel that good, especially when you will be able to invest a lot and use, for example, a very good unique body armor such as Warrior Invictus or Coming Calamity. So I'm going to put that in A. However, if that would be a list just for the league start, I would definitely put that in S. So currently I think Smith goes there. And talking about old Ascendancy, I honestly wanted to feel that D tier. I think the one that should go there is Chayula. It's Acolyte of Chayula actually, but I think a lot of people just call it Chayula. So I honestly would like to keep C probably empty, so we're going to have Chayula in D, and C is going to be the barrier against Chayula, because we will need to protect the rest of the classes from that calamity. If Chayula is going to get buffed, maybe it will go up to B tier or C tier, and maybe it will go up, maybe it will be even there. But currently, based on what we had before, Chayula will need a proper redoing of most of his passive, or at least darkness based passive, because before it's been pretty weak. So compared to Invoker, I just wouldn't pick that in the most cases, because almost any build that you can do with him, you can do with other Ascendancies much better. Another Ascendancy that in my opinion is going to A tier is Gemling. Gemling been S tier before and early, but I think right now it's going to be an A tier, mostly because stat stacking is going to nerfed heavily, and GG's already mentioned that many times. I still think that Gemling is going to be viable, because it has a lot of cool abilities in the kit, but stat stacks nerf is definitely going to pull it a little back, and in that case going for A is just making perfect sense for me. And another Ascendancy that should be together with Chayula, even if it sounds horrible, being a Witch Hunter. But right now there have been a lot of buffs promised for both Witch Hunters and crossbows in general. So I think Witch Hunter is going to be A, or at least B at worst. I'm going to place that at B before we'll see the patch notes, but it could be at A in some particular cases. I really hope that they will buff Witch Hunter significantly, because the whole Ascendancy theme looks kinda cool, and it would be very good if they would add some particular skills, or will just improve Sniper in general, because having two Ascendancies in D for early just felt a little strange to me, because a lot of people expected much more from the Witch Hunter. But right now I'm expecting B or A placement approximately. I'm going to keep that in B just to be sure. I'm still keeping C open as a protection barrier against Chayula. Alright, so what else do we have? I think we have a pretty nice Ascendancy such as Pathfinder. The biggest issue with Pathfinder is that some passives are not really performing that good. You have concussions, they're feeling nice, you can run some poison builds with it, but I don't really think it deserves an S tier because it's less flexible and there's like less options in general. Also, some particular options could be a little too clunky to play on Pathfinder, so I think it's a stable A tier. However, if there are going to be some particular buffs for poison, and there's a big chance for it, because poison right now being a little underappreciated, I think Pathfinder could move to S. But for now, I'm keeping that in A again. That's a solid, but not too promising approach to Ascendancy. And Infernalist, in my opinion, is going to A, but it can even fall to B, especially if Demon Form is going to take a hit, or for example the skills that you are using for it, such as Hex Blast. Because right now for minions, Lich is looking more promising compared to Infernalist. And for caster, Lich is looking more promising again. So it really looks like Lich is doing everything that Infernalist is doing, but better. And there's not a lot of upside for Infernalist compared to Lich. There still could be some particular builds, and if Demon Form is going to survive properly, you will be able to play that just fine. So I wouldn't place Infernalist into B. But going A is pretty much what we are currently expecting. Mostly because you will be able to just pick Lich in almost all the cases and feel better. And if they're going to hit Chaos particular skills that Infernalist use more heavily on, or if they're going to nerf Demon form in particular, I think it could even fall lower. I don't think it can go to C because it's still a protection barrier. On top of it, we also have a new one, which is Tactician. I still working on overview for Tactician, but I think Tactician is looking more prominent than a lot of people are thinking. Because Tactician right now has a very decent potential with different type of minions. Even if banners are not really strong, there are still some particular damage issues for Tactician, but I think it still could reach an A tier. Even if not, it could still stay in B, and it's going to be pretty fine. The biggest issue is that for totems we have another option such as Warbringer right here. My biggest issue with Warbringer is that the Ascendancy itself is clunky. I think it's pretty strong, and just based on power, I think it will be stable A tier again. But since totems overall are kinda clunky, and you don't have cool additional bonuses or clear spells, for example, Tactician has just like a big wall of fire, when you're just like shooting arrows from the sky. There is no such things for Warbringer. So I think Warbringer currently are looking much more like a B, if they're not going to buff some particular parts of it. So that's what I'm currently thinking. And right now it's a perfect time to play Stormweaver. Stormweaver been a very stable S tier in early access. However, right now, I think it's under fire. GGG is already mentioned in the interview that they're going to nerf mana interactions. And mana interactions, that's a huge nerf for an Archmage. We currently don't know what the numbers will be, but even if they're going to nerf it slightly, I think it can damage performance of Stormweaver, especially considering that we have Lich, which is currently a very nice option for everything caster related. So Stormweaver could fall to A. I could still give it a benefit of the doubt and keep it an S. However, since they promising the nerf to mana, I think it would be safe to put it in A. If that nerf is going to be too big, for example, if they're going to gut it completely, it could even fall lower to B, but definitely not to C. So currently, in my opinion, Stormweaver should be in A, even if it's been a stable S tier before. So we're just keeping it here to be safe. It also would be pretty much interesting if they're going to touch the Ascendancy itself or just nerf mana across the tree, for example, so it will be harder to stack, or maybe directly nerf Archmage. There are so many options, and for current situation my prediction is about A tier. Chronomancer, in my opinion, was a little not stable in terms of performance. There have been a few interesting builds for it, mostly based around like Hammer of Gods and stuff like that, but I think it's a little too clunky currently, especially compared to everything that we have in an S tier, or even the most part of an A tier. It also heavily based on the interactions, so you will need to do a lot for Chronomancer to be effective. So I think the B tier is probably the very good place for it. I wouldn't call it weak, but unfortunately I would say almost everybody above is outperforming Chronomancer, and especially Stormweaver, which is currently pretty strong even if they're going to hit the mana. The last one is Titan for Warriors, and it's currently very hard to place it. Generally I would like to say A, but people been unhappy with Warrior for a very long time. There are probably one or two pretty decent builds for Titans, but right now I think almost everybody above can outperform it as well. I think 30% bonus for all the small passives that Titans have is still a very strong bonus, and I hope there are going to be some particular buffs for maces, for example. And I also think that Warrior by itself could be a pretty nice league starter because it can move very fast through the campaign, and since we have Kitava already, and that's pretty much defensive Ascendancy, Titan right here, it's an offensive Ascendancy. You can still get 15% of additional maximum life there, and you will need to spend a few Ascendancy points for bad bonuses, but right now I think Titan should be somewhere between A and B. depending on if there are going to be buffs and how good Kitava is going to perform. But since we have Kitava and A, and I'm betting that Kitava will be at least much tankier, I think placing the Titan in B would be fine. But I would like to mention that Titan is very close to A right now, and maybe I could be wrong and should go to A. And the last Ascendancy is Blood Mage, which is in my opinion definitely goes to an A tier. Because mostly Blood Mage used only for one thing, it's critical spells, and I think critical spells are going to stay in the game. In terms of the league starter potential, I don't think that Blood Mage is very good, because to utilize that, you will need to get a lot of investment in. So if you would just judge it as a league starter, I will need to remove the barrier protection from Chayula and place her here. But since we're judging the Ascendancy overall, I think it should be pretty stable A tier. Maybe it will go to B in some situation, because we currently have Lich and you can still play Stormweaver. But if you're not basing your character like around the mana, so Stormweaver is not really appreciated here. And for example, you don't want to utilize the energy shield that current Lich can provide. I think Blood Mage right here would probably be the best option for a caster, so I'm keeping that in A. So that's how the list looks in the end. Please keep in mind that it's just a prediction, because we still will need to see patch notes, but I don't really see a lot of placement changes. Probably Deadeye or Monk could theoretically go to A. Something could go to S from there if some particular build or some particular skill is going to get buffed. And maybe Chayula will finally be able to break that barrier, escape the D tier, go to C or maybe even to B. I don't think they will buff it strong enough to go to A or higher. The rest is probably going to stay the same, so we are going to have Amazon, Lich, Deadeye and Monk in S, because those builds are very flexible, you can play them with so many different skills, and for example, almost all of them, except Lich, could be played with a bow. Lich itself could be played with spells, and you can play spells with Invoker, for example, if you prefer it that way. I think Kitava theoretically could go to S if survivability is going to be a very big issue, and if they're going to nerf Energy Shield too heavily. Gemling could stay in F if attribute stacking is not going to get nerfed completely. I think Pathfinder is probably one of the closest characters right here to S tier, together with Stormweaver right here. Both of them are good enough to be an S, and just my doubts are keeping them from it. I also think that Tactician could fall to B theoretically, but currently I'm still expecting that both like crossbows are going to get significant buff, and probably some particular totems or stuff like that. So Blood Mage also can go theoretically jump a little. The rest is probably going to stay the same. If there are going to be some particular absolutely unique build with like 3 unique rings, Ritualist can jump a little too. And if all the numbers on Witch Hunters are going to be literally doubled, I think it could go to A and be more stable currently. But that's what we currently have. Some people would also say that I'm underestimating Titan and he should be an A, but I've never been a big fan of melee skills, especially when you're like through melee and you need to touch everything. The biggest build for Titan been using like Hammer of Gods or Double Herald. I think both Double Herald and Hammer of Gods could be nerfed pretty soon. It will be interesting to go back to that list a little later on and maybe do another when we will have at least maybe 1 or 2 weeks into the league already, and see how different it will be. However, that's my prediction at the moment, and I hope I will be close enough. Take it with a grain of salt as usual, guys, and let me know in the comments what you would change in the order, and what you would play like higher or lower, and what's your opinion about the current order is. Thank you very much for watching, and have an amazing league start, everybody. It's very close.